Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Best of British Blackwell. Sorry it's been a while since my last video, but we've had a little bit of a break for the summer. But now we're back and I'm going to be showing you many more recipes in the next couple of weeks. Today's recipe, quite a long-winded one, but it's going to be my favourite type of pie. It's a chicken, leek and ham hock pie. Quite a lot of preparation. There is two ways of making this. You can make it the quick and simple way by buying all of the pre-made ingredients and just throwing it into a pie, or you can do it the way I'm going to do it, which is make it all from scratch. So come over, take a look at the ingredients, let's make a start. Okay, so as I said, I am starting this recipe from scratch. So that involves me cooking down these ham hocks here that I've got. One of the reasons that I do this is that these ham hocks, when they're pre-cooked and pre-packaged and ready for you to just throw into a pie, they're really expensive. However, these uncooked versions, or these uncooked ham hocks here, are actually really cheap and they're really easy to turn into the kind of shop bought stuff that you can get. So we'll make a start by showing you how you kind of cook these down. First things first, what we're going to do is we're going to remove the skin from these ham hocks. So we've managed to get the skin off of these ham hocks now without actually removing too much in the way of tissue or meat. So we're going to get rid of these. Now, the reason that we take the skin off is that it's twofold. The skin will not become edible. You won't be able to eat it. It doesn't taste very nice, it doesn't look very nice, particularly when you slow cook it. If you cook these things too fast, this meat will never break down because the meat on here is very, very tough. This comes from the top half of a pig's leg. So it does a lot of work, it carries around a lot of weight and is moving around quite a bit. So it's very, very tough. This needs to be slow cooked quite a lot. Also, that skin has got a lot of fat in it. When you start to slow cook that out and simmer it out and boil it out, all you'll end up with is a big layer of kind of like foamy white mess on the top of your pan. You don't want that. You want that to be a nice clean cook. So what we're going to do with these now is place them inside our slow cooker, which I've got right here. Let me bring this over here. So this is our slow cooker. I'm going to place them in. I'm not going to trivet them or anything like that. They can just sit straight in there. What we're going to do is get some salt. Hopefully you can see this. Let me check the camera angle. Brilliant. Yeah, you can see all of that. We're going to get some black pepper. Just a little handful. Some people put cloves in there, but because I'm going to be sticking this into a pie, I'm not going to be putting cloves in there at all. I'm just going to go for the salt and pepper. Now we've got a carrot, roughly chopped, about a carrot and a half. Notice how I'm roughly chopping this. We're not going to be using these carrots for anything. We're just going to create a bit of a stock. And now we've got an onion, straight in. And then all we do is top that up with some nice hot water. So there we have it. The ham hocks are out. They don't look too good at the moment, but what we're going to do is we're going to let these cool down. Then we're going to pick all the meat off of these. I'm going to use that in our chicken and ham hock pie later. This stuff here, the stock that's been left behind, this is beautiful as just the type of stock that you would use if you've ever seen my peas pudding recipe, where you can sieve this off, take the veg out, throw some split peas in there and make some peas pudding. Or what you could do as well is take a stick blender in there and blend up all that veg. You could get some cream in there, some peas, and throw a little bit of this ham hock in there as well. Make yourself some lovely pea and ham soup. But basically all I'm saying is don't throw this away. This is a brilliant ingredient, full of flavour. As you can see, not much fat content in there, and it's really good for some other dishes. So don't throw it away, make sure you use it. So now that we've got the ham hock cooked, I've picked it apart, I've taken the nicest possible bits, picked all the fat off of them, you know, just to make sure it's nice lean ham hock. We're going to make a start on constructing the rest of the pie, so let's talk about the ingredients here. We've got some very standard diced chicken breast. We've got a leek. You can also use an onion or some, if you don't like onions, you don't have to use that at all. I just think this adds a nice bit of sweetness. We've got some fresh thyme. We've got some double cream. We've got a little bit of horseradish, a little bit of British beer mustard, and some strong English mustard. We're not going to use much of these, but they just add a nice little texture to the sauce that goes in this pie. We've also got a little bit of butter that we're going to saute the leeks off with. So the next thing to do is to get yourself a pan and start to get these ingredients in, and I'll show you step by step how we're going to get that done. Okay, so we get our pan onto a heat. I've put a tablespoon of vegetable oil in there, and I'm now going to add to that a tablespoon of butter. Okay, so hopefully now you can hear these are starting to saute down quite nicely. Once we get to that stage, we just give it a little bit of a stir just to make sure that the butter and the oil that we put into this pan mixes and infuses quite nicely. Now we're going to go and get our chicken. Now the reason that I took the chicken out of the packaging first and didn't put it straight from the packaging into the pan here is because, as with some packets of chicken, it was holding a little bit of moisture. I didn't want that moisture in this pan. We're going to have quite a lot of moisture in here anyway. So what I did is I took them out of the packet and patted them down a little bit just to make sure that they weren't holding too much moisture in there. Let me just get a little cloth. Can't be too careful with chicken and cooking meat and so on. So yeah, so what we're going to do with this now is we're going to let the chicken cook out. We'll just reset my cooker. We're going to get some seasoning in there. So I'm going to start off with some Worcester sauce, as I always put in my dishes. We're going to get some black pepper and some salt. Now we're not looking for any of this to go golden brown. We're just looking for this chicken to part cook through. Okay, so we're getting on for done at this stage with the chicken. As you can see, we've still got some pink bits in this chicken. Don't worry about that just yet. What we're going to do is we're going to crank the heat right up. This is on now as high as it will go. Now we're going to start to add some of the cream in here. So we get the cream in. Now we're going to bring our mustards and horseradish over. I'm going to start out with a teaspoon of horseradish. Give it a bit of a stir. The reason that we go up to the high heat is that we want the chicken to continue to cook, but adding cold cream is going to bring the heat of the temperature of the pan down. So we want the two to counteract and counterbalance each other. And we also want this sauce to start to thicken. So we want it thicker than the consistency of the double cream. You'll see the consistency I'm looking for in a minute. This is an incredibly hot mustard. I'm going with half a teaspoon of this. It's Succulent. I'll post some details in a link below where you can get this stuff, but trust me, the strong English mustard is very hot. And then finally, we've got a teaspoon of the beer mustard, which is like a whole grain mustard that, again, is Succulent. It's like a whole grain mustard that they've made with some real ale, which is really quite tasty. And as you can see, we're starting to develop beautiful colour here. You've got the lovely greens from the leeks, and they're going to throw off a lovely bit of sweetness. And then also the cream's made it, you know, quite saucy, but you've got a lovely yellow colour coming through here now with that mustard. Now we add a little bit more cream, in here. We're going to turn the heat down now. And now we're just going to let this simmer out for a bit. Okay, so I'm now very happy with the consistency of everything in here. I'm also happy that this chicken is pretty much cooked. And in fact, when we put the pie into the oven, the only thing we're going to be really doing is bringing it back up to perfect temperature. I've turned the heat off now, and what's going to start to happen is this sauce is going to continue to thicken. So don't panic too much if it doesn't thicken on standing. You can always add, you know, a little bit of corn flour and water if you want to thicken it up. Or don't also worry if it's too thick, because you can always add a little bit more cream or a little dash of milk, maybe even water, just to loosen it up a little bit. So what we're going to do now is let this stand, let this cool, and we're going to concentrate on getting our pastry case ready. Okay, so the next step of the cooking process is going to be to prepare our pie dish. Now, I've used standard pie dishes before. They're really good, but with this pie, with it being my favourite, I want it to look really nice. I want to present it really well. So the first thing I'm going to do is get my nice pie dish here. I've cut a piece of greaseproof paper which will fit directly onto the bottom of this. And the reason for that is that I want to create as much of a possibility as possible of getting this pie out in one whole piece. And the greaseproof paper will stop it sticking from the bottom. I'd like to put it round the sides, but with this being a beveled side, it's a little bit harder to cut that paper to size. So I'm going to stick one on the bottom. To make my chances better of getting this out, I'm also going to grease the bottom before I put the piece of paper on it. Now, all I'm doing is getting some kitchen roll, and I'm using some stalk margarine or baking margarine, or yeah, you don't need to use butter for this. You don't really want to use oil. But what you do want to do is make sure that you get plenty of this in every single crevice on this pie dish. Okay, so making sure we've got a nice clean surface to work on. What we're going to do is get our short crust pastry out. Now, why are we using short crust pastry? Short crust pastry works really well for the bottom of a pastry, mainly because it's a little bit drier. It holds its shape a little bit better than puff pastry, which has got lots of layers of butter and pastry in it. Because we want to be able to get this pie out of the tin, you need a pastry that's going to just hold itself together a little bit better, and that's what this will do. It's not quite the perfect shape for us yet. So like I said, nice clean surface here. Get a little bit of flour so your pastry doesn't stick. Turn it out onto your work surface. A little bit more flour on top so your rolling pin doesn't stick. And what we'll do is give it one more turn just to make sure it's completely coated in the flour, and we'll just roll it out. We just want to make sure it fits and it's going to hold our ingredients in there nicely. So once we've got it to this stage, what I'm going to do is fold it over like this. You can be a little bit robust with it. Hopefully you can see it. So let me check my camera angle. Yeah, good. You can be a bit robust with this. And then we're going to get it into our pastry, our pie tin here. And then we're going to work it into the corners. Best way to work it into the corners is not to push it from the inside in, because what will happen is you will start to make the pastry on the inside a lot thinner. Pull the pastry up and push it down. So make sure you're using all of the pastry from the top rather than in the bottom. Okay? And then it's at this stage that with your hands you go round and you start to feel the detail of the side of the pie tin. Don't worry about it being a mess. This is the enjoyable bit, the messy bit. Start to squeeze it in. You want the sides of your pie to be nice and thick so it can hold the ingredients inside, and that it's strong enough so that when you take it out it stays together. Okay, so I'm happy with that. At the moment, looks a bit rough and ready, but don't worry too much. Certainly not the finished article yet. What I've got here now is another piece of greaseproof paper, which I've pre-prepared, pre-cut. This will fit inside this case here. I'm going to use this to protect the pastry from the rice that I'm about to use to blind bake my pastry case. Yes, rice. Let me show you. Lots of people tend to use baking beads when they blind bake things. And you know, I get that, they serve a purpose, they're pretty decent. But, you know, they're also quite expensive. You go into these cooking shops and, you know, it's not an inconsiderable amount of money, when in fact rice works just as well. Okay, so here we go. Now, as you can see, let me just angle this camera up a little bit and focus in on what we've got. As you can see, our pastry case has been blind baked. That means that it's started to cook. It's not completely cooked, it's not completely done. You don't want that. What you want is it to be partially cooked so that it holds its structure when you put the pie in there. What you need to do now is just let this cool down, let it get back down to room temperature. It's still quite fragile, you don't want it falling apart. So just leave it here, let it get down to room temperature. Then what we'll do is we'll take this rice out and then we will start to fill it up and then put our pastry top on it. But we're looking good. Okay, so our pastry is blind baked, and as you can see what I've done is I've gone around the edges and trimmed off some of the excess pastry that we put on there earlier. What you can also see is that I've added our ham hock into our chicken mixture, and that has immediately taken up quite a lot of the sauce that was remaining in there. So what I'm going to do is fill this pie up with the chicken and ham hock and leek mixture. Beautiful. Just make sure it's spread out nice and evenly. And then what I've also done is I've made a little bit more sauce. As you can see, we've got a few gaps in here, but that's okay. That's not a problem at all. It's still a very well filled pie. I'm going to take this to one side. Now, what we're going to do is let that all get down to room temperature, and then we're going to put our puff pastry top on. But before we do that, get a little bit of thyme in there. Just a little bit of chopped thyme. Adds another little flavour dimension, so just sprinkle that on top. Now we're ready for our puff pastry top, and we'll get it back in the oven. Okay, so we're at the point now where everything is back down to room temperature. The reason that you wait for everything to get down to room temperature is that the pastry can react a little bit funny to things that are hot. If you put your puff pastry on top while everything inside this pie is still hot, it will start to cook from the inside and bubble up, and it will just go a little bit weird. So you let everything cool down and you let everything cook back inside the oven again. There's only one more thing I want to add to this pie, and that's a few peas here. I love a few peas inside a pie. I think it adds a lovely bit of colour and a lovely bit of texture. Might look like a lot, but as this pie starts to cook, those peas will start to seep through and kind of level themselves out now. What we're going to do now is we're going to prepare this pie for the puff pastry top to go on. That's very simple. Earlier on, we cut some of the short crust pastry away from the side of this dish. We did that because we're going to replace it with a puff pastry top. So what I want to do is butter the outside of this dish so that the puff pastry top that I put on later doesn't stick to it. Bring our pastry back over and then just lay this straight across the top. How simple was that? And then we peel our paper off. Now we've buttered the side of this dish, but we want to make sure our puff pastry sticks to the short crust pastry that we've got on the inside of this pie. So all we need to do is push it down, make sure it's touching, and then what we'll do is we'll get our knife and we'll trim the side. Just stick a knife around the outside here. Okay, so we are getting ready to put this pie in the oven. All we need to do is give it a bit of a dusting with some egg wash. And I'm not using just an egg for this. This is a mixture of 1 part egg, 2 parts egg to 1 part milk. Okay, so here we go. What you'll see immediately is that I've obviously cut a piece of this pie out. That is mainly because I'm serving this really hot, and the hardest thing in the world is to turn this pie out because it's still hot. If I turn it out onto a plate on its own, all it's going to do is collapse. It's going to look really unimpressive. So, because I'm having this for dinner, I wanted to serve it while it was still warm. So, what I did is I took one piece out and that fell apart dramatically, obviously. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you how I'm going to get the second piece out, which hopefully will come out like a decent looking piece of pie. So we get our knife, we cut a piece of pie, move it around just a little tiny bit, get our fork in there, and look, all the top's coming off now. Of course it is, but not to worry. Let's get another one of our forks. I'm trying to make this look pretty. That's where I always struggle, because my food never looks pretty, it just always tastes good. So let's take this piece, put it there, but look, that's the side of the pie that's fallen off there. But look at all these ingredients in here, the peas, the chicken, the ham. You can see that everything's come together really beautifully. Doesn't look the best in the world, but it tastes really good. And all we're going to do with this, serve it up with some potatoes, some beans. But there we go. This is a chicken, leek and ham hock pie. I threw some peas in there at the last minute, but it's just really beautiful. Really quite simple to make if you've got the time on your hands, and it tastes really good. Give it a go.